CBN opens December sale with $210 million. Join the fight against corruption, Udoma urges ICANN Plus. NNPC clarifies Trans-Forcados pipeline surveillance contract, says more than $80 million lost in breaches under old contract. This is Business Express reaching you from the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. I am Amina Nigerian. Welcome to the program. The Minister of Budget and National Planning, Senator Udoma, has called on the Institution of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria to support the anti-corruption fight of the federal government by creating systems that promote transparency and make it difficult for diversion of resources. The minister was speaking when the executive of the institute visited him. He explained that the corruption has been the bane of development in the country, and professional bodies like ICANN have a role to play if the fight is to be successful. The Central Bank of Nigeria on Tuesday injected the sum of $210 million in the interbank forex exchange market. This is the first intervention in the month of December. Authorized dealers in the wholesale segment of the market received the sum of $100 million, while the invisible segments were allocated the sum of $55 million each. Director of Corporate Communications Department of CBN, Isaac Okorofo, restated that the bank's resolve to meet genuine customers' requests in the various segments of the market. Now, similarly, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria has warned speculators not to bet against the naira despite uptick in the exchange rate last week. The governor stated this at the annual lecture of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria in Lagos. He said the bank had enough reserve to defend the naira. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, has said that the Trans-Forcados pipeline surveillance contract recently awarded was preempted by a loss of more than $80 million due to the breaches in the old contract. The management of NNPC, in a statement by the Group General Manager, Public Affairs Division, Undu Ugomadu, said the decision to award the contract of the oil infrastructure surveillance to Ocean Marine Solutions came as a suitable business alternative. The NNPC said it took the decision after it incurred massive losses in projected losses from the 87 kilometers Trans-Forcados pipeline of more than 250 barrels per day earlier in the year. Ugamadu stated that the arrangement will see the surveillance company take responsibility in the event of any breach or leakages to the pipeline it's paid to watch. The statement further dismissed claims that the new arrangement will spell doom for host communities, adding that it had evolved the host community participation model, which naturally incorporates youth within the vicinity of its assets and areas of operation as veritable stakeholders and participants in the running of such facilities as already being practiced in the Escravos, Warri and Boni Port Harcourt lines. The decision by Qatar to quit the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, is creating uncertainty in the global oil market, the major fear being the fate of oil exporting countries if crude oil prices crash. We take a look.
The organization has been facing challenges ranging from its decision to cut down oil supply to stabilize market to interference of global politics. Qatar is the 11th biggest oil producer in OPEC, pumping more than 600,000 barrels a day. Economists are of the view that walking away from OPEC's production controls could mean Qatar may increase output after leaving the group, undermining efforts to support prices.
This industry is one industry that had been transformed by the forces of globalization. Barriers have been broken down. The markets are more integrated, so also the industry.
But when Qatar pulls out now, they will now have their own, they'll be their own masters. They will not dictate, the terms as far as the gas market is concerned.
To discuss the recent development in the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, we are now being joined by an oil and gas expert, Olabode Showemi. Welcome to Business Express today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Recent developments show that Qatar says in January of next year they are going to withdraw from OPEC. Now, do you see that, as they say, they want to focus on oil? Or is there another reason, gas, yes. Or is there another reason, say maybe political, behind that decision?
The things about reasons and all that is that we'll invariably be second-guessing them. But we can say the facts, and then it's just normal for us to connect the dots by making a logical conclusion. Qatar has been having an 18-month diplomatic dispute with Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is by far the most influential member of OPEC. They are the largest producers. They are strongest in terms of determining the oil price. The relationship between the US and Saudi Arabia is strongest, especially when it comes to determining oil prices. So there's no gainsaying that. If they are having disputes with Saudi Arabia, pulling out of OPEC ultimately weakens the capacity of Saudi Arabia to negotiate as a country. It should be understood that up until like about 10 years ago, they were second biggest gas exporter in the world. Nigeria was actually first in the early days of NLNG and the work. But our own LNG trains slowed down, primarily because we wanted to develop the availability of gas. And that was when government came up with the domestic supply obligation, that's the DSO. Okay. But anyway, those are internal issues. So, but as of today, they're the strongest producers of LNG. They control a significant market within the Asia Pacific region, to Korea, to Japan, and to much of India. So invariably, yes, they probably want to pull out, and there is no doubt that if you're going to leave a relationship that is more than 50 years old, since 1961, there has to be strong reasons for that, and we suspect that it's their relationship with.
Who wins and who loses in all of this?
Well, OPEC as a body will lose. There's no because collectively you are stronger. But what it also speaks to is the fact that the unity and the bond of OPEC is not strong enough to heal the rift between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Now, ultimately, on the long run, it is possible that OPEC can balance itself and come out stronger. But that will actually mean that Saudi Arabia and the OPEC members need to form a stronger bond. Because it is not just Qatar now who is a significant producer. There are a lot of nations all over the world who are producing oil who are not members of OPEC. Their production may not be significant in terms of export, but they are tangible. There's Ghana, there's Gabon, there are a lot of countries within the Asia Pacific region. The US produces oil, China produces significant amount of oil, India as well. So when you have an aggregation of all those factors, they become a competing factor for OPEC. And that is the situation that OPEC itself wants to avoid.
Now, there is fear for the uncertainty, the crashing price of crude oil.
Yes.
How do you see this impacting the scheme of things?
Well, it's a catch-22 thing. You know, first of all, it's an economic issue in the sense that it's going to be determined by the forces of demand and supply. Anytime generally that the crude oil prices go down all over the world, there's usually an increase in number of industries that come up because the price of oil and the machinery to run all those factories usually is cheaper because of crude oil that is cheaper. But once those demand keep rising, there will be a subsequent pull and push on the price of crude oil, and it will also grow up. In the 80s, there was especially in the early part of the 80s, there was a time crude oil was selling for less than water. And at the OPEC meeting then, I remember that
Interesting times.
Yes, and they said that crude oil is not water. That was the theme, because the price of refined water was more expensive than crude oil at the time. But all that also changed, and crude oil prices went to well over $100 per barrel. And of course, it also crashed. Okay. So at a point in time, there will be increase. There's no doubt about that. But the capacity of the producer nations to determine or to have influence over that increase and the price is significantly weakened by the immediate withdrawal of Qatar.
Now, Qatar says it's leaving in January of next year, and OPEC has been talking about cuts. Iraq is signaling it's possibly also thinking of opting out. What do you make of these developments?
Well, maybe we are getting to the stages where the OPEC as a body will not have the powers that it currently has. I think that's what we're looking at, because Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, those are significant power blocks within the OPEC member nation. And it is important that all of them don't pull out. There are no doubts that issues such as pulling out of OPEC are not decisions people take lightly. So the question will also be the leadership of OPEC, particularly the countries, the Petroleum Ministers Association, the member nations, should have to strengthen their own diplomatic relationship so that they can affect those places. I mean, there's a little diversion there. I'm aware that a few years ago, the country of Kuwait, the Kuwaiti Foundation, wrote a protest letter to Nigeria about the fact that there was some sponsorship available for students to be taken advantage of, which was not taken advantage of by Nigeria under the OPEC agreement. And that was due to bureaucratic lapses. But the point I'm trying to make out of that is that those OPEC nations have certain facilities for interacting with each other, and those interactions need to be strengthened so that it can affect diplomatic relationships within the member nations, and they'll be able to solve such rifts in the future.
Now, do you see OPEC rescheduling its meeting for Thursday?
I don't see that happening, because rescheduling the meeting or not rescheduling the meeting does not have significant impact, especially on the immediate, in terms of the decision that Qatar can make. Rather, that meeting will also enable Qatar to make a withdrawal that will have less shock on the association. Whatever needs to be done to ensure that Qatar remains or Qatar returns are things that will not be done at that meeting. They may be ratified at the meeting, but those are things that will happen behind the scenes.
Now we're talking about diplomatic relations, foreign countries. Coming back home, in all of this, what does this mean for Nigeria?
Well, to speak the language that the common man understands, it means reduction in our income. It's as simple as that.
And let's not also forget that our budget is tied.
Yes, our budget is tied. I think it's about 55 or something to 55. I can't remember the figures, but something in the 50s, which is currently higher than that now. So it means that up until there's a fluctuation, we're still fine. But it is not so much as this year's budget that's the issue. It is the subsequent years. And of course, this speaks to the fact that we need to move from being a mono economy that is dependent. I mean, we've said that and it's been repeated over the years. But most importantly, there is the handwriting is on the wall. The signals are bearing us in the face that we need to ensure that small scale industries need to start exporting. It's no longer the big people now. Small scale industry. We need to export services. We need to export goods.
How does this exporting start?
Basically, if we look at a country like Sweden, which has a population of about 9 million, less than Lagos, and 70% of their businesses are foreign based in the sense that they export. So we need to see local chambers of commerce. We need to see everybody that does any kind of business being trained, being educated, being motivated, and being organized to export. There's a training for export, which means that people need to know the processes to get them qualified. They need to be motivated to know the benefits that are in there for the export. Then they need to be organized. In other words, government needs to aggregate them together, break a lot of the red tape, and help them to get contacts in there. The welder can export his services. He can export. He can weld in Ghana. He can weld in Sierra Leone. They can weld in the US. It's about aggregating the services. The carpenter can do the same. The granite man can do the same. The farmer growing granite, cocoa, and everything. So if there's a push and a focus for export within every local government, you alter the dynamics of income in those local governments. And with 774 local governments having direct forex coming into their activities, there's going to be a dynamic change in our economic activities.
In summary, look inwards.
Absolutely. There's no other way.
Thank you very much, Olabode Shoemi, an oil and gas expert. It's been a pleasure having you on the program today.
Pleasure is all mine.
Thank you. The Nigerian Telecommunications Commission, NCC, says stakeholders must come together and develop a regulatory framework in preparation for the 5G and HAP technology. The Executive Vice Chairman of the NCC, Professor Umar Dambata, stated this in a message delivered by Austin at a forum in Abuja. Dambata explained that though the G5 framework is still being defined by International Telecommunications Union, there is also the need to prepare towards a massive deployment of infrastructure tailored to support the technology. He said the Commission had identified some potential frequency bands that might be harmonized for the deployment and therefore suspend the licensing of these frequencies. The Nigerian Stock Exchange for Wednesday, 5th December, closed on positive territory by 0.47% to close at 31,151.68 basis point, with market capitalization at 11.3 trillion naira. We now take a quick look at how the global markets are faring.
Stock markets around the globe opened mostly negative 5th December due to feasible economic decline. South Africa's JSA Africa Top 40, Nairobi All Share, Tunisia's Tunidex and Ghana's GSA Composite Index started the day on a negative territory, while Namibia Overall Index topped 0.09%. European stocks were lower Wednesday morning as renewal of trade worries worsened investors' fear about global economic growth. Stocks in Asia declined after an overnight dive on Wall Street as investors worried about a potential economic slowdown and the state of the United States and China's trade war. Also in the United States on Tuesday, 4th December, stocks fell as investors worried about a bond market phenomenon, signaling a possible economic slowdown.
Stocks in Asia traded down Wednesday as investors worried about potential economic slowdown and the state of U.S. and China trade wars. Bossede Abel brings up to speed. Let's take a look. a look at how the Naira is exchanging with other international currencies. We take a look. The South African economy is out of recession, growing by 2.2% in the third quarter of 2018. Statement released in Pretoria indicates that the country's gross domestic product (GDP) grew annually by 2.2% in 3 months through September compared to prior quarters. The exit was boosted by recoveries in manufacturing, transport and finance sectors. Oyeyemi Ajayi tells us on how to convert waste to wealth. We take a look.
When talking about waste, the first thing that comes to mind is something totally useless, abandoned and can never be useful anymore. On a daily basis, Nigerians come across heaps of waste materials like papers, nylons, plastics, even tires. But it has never occurred to some people how these so-called waste materials can be utilized. A visit to Woodbridge Garden sent a lot of message about waste management. It could look just like every other garden, but the creativity behind the building is one that cannot be underestimated. The garden is to serve as an eatery, as well as an entertainment spot for the visitors. This garden could seem like a normal garden, much more typical like every other garden in the FCT. But what makes it quite different is the artistic ingenuity of the owner of the garden, Rufai. All furniture, especially the chairs and tables, are made of tires. These artistic works are spread all around the garden, right from the artificial flowers down to the bottle-designed bar, with the ceiling designed with crates of eggs. The walkway was designed with pebbles instead of tiles.
These are tires from the foundations. We have to go to, to get this, and even the building. What you do is, the first one we did, we had to demolish it because it was not stable. There was no stability. It was like shaking, and with that time we have spent almost about 7 up to 1 million. So we have to demolish and start all over again. It's almost 1.5 years. Almost 1.5 years. But it's so many things. You do this, you change.
Another thing that caught my attention at the garden is the scrapped vehicle behind the bar. This vehicle is what you would say to be an abandoned vehicle. As you can see, the front tires are gone and so many things are not actually in place in this vehicle. Interestingly, what this vehicle is used for cannot be underestimated. It plays a very vital role in this garden. Guess what? It is used for barbecue.
With that thing, what do we do? Something that will benefit the society, they will benefit the environment, everything. Then we come up with the idea, let's do something based on using the concept of reuse of material and recycling of material that are normally we can pick from the waste bin or something like that. That we can show that this thing can be turned into real, something that can be useful, can be turned into something that we normally throw in the dustbin, can be useful, can be turned into something useful.
For the likes of Aziz Rufai, youths need to look inwards and bring out the creative ingenuity in them for development of the society. No doubt, there is wealth in every waste.
Well, Oyeyemi's Ajayi of a barbecue grill, we wrap up Business Express for today. But remember, you can send us your feedback via email businessexpress@nta.gov.ng. You can also reach us through our Twitter handle, and the handle is NTA News Now. Don't forget the hashtag BizX showing on your screen. Until I come your way again on Friday, I am Amina Nujain. Have a pleasant day.